The Galactic Council had ruled over the stars for 12,000 years. 900 different species lived under their laws. 3 spiral arms of the galaxy belonged to them. Every race that discovered how to travel between stars eventually joined the Council. Some joined because they wanted to. Others joined because they had no choice. The Council was powerful, ancient, feared by all who knew of it. Ambassador Kelvith of the Zerani hegemony stood in the Great Chamber. The room was enormous, built from crystals that glowed with soft light. Thousands of delegates from hundreds of worlds sat in curved rows that rose up toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. Every eye, whether they had 2 or 4 or 6, was fixed on Kelvath as he read the message on his datapad. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly. He read the message again, certain he had made a mistake, but the words remained the same. "The human delegation has declined our offer of provisional membership," he announced. His voice echoed through the silent chamber. "They have stated that the terms are unacceptable." For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. In 12,000 years of galactic history, no species had ever said no to the Council. The very idea was unthinkable. Joining the Council meant protection from enemies, access to trade routes, and the wisdom of ancient civilizations. Refusing meant standing alone against the darkness of space. High Chancellor. Morith rose from his throne at the center of the chamber. He was very old, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His skin glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed with his emotions. Right now, that light flickered with confusion and concern. "Perhaps there has been a translation error," Morith suggested. His voice was calm, but everyone could see his skin flickering faster than normal. "No species declines the Council. The benefits are too great. The dangers of refusal are too severe." "There was no error, High Chancellor," Kelvith replied. "The humans were very clear. They said our terms were, and I quote, insulting." The chamber erupted into noise. Delegates shouted at each other in 100 different languages. Some demanded immediate military action. Others called for patience and understanding. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had heard. Far across the galaxy, on a small blue planet called Earth, Admiral Catherine Brooks stood in a room deep beneath the surface. This was the War Room, the most secure location on the planet. Screens covered every wall, showing maps of known space, fleet positions, and intelligence reports. Catherine was 53 years old. Her hair had turned gray early, cut short in a military style. Her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. She had served humanity through 2 events that had nearly destroyed them. First was the climate wars of the 2050s. Second was the Zerani Scout incident of 2089. When an alien ship had crashed in Australia and changed everything around her, stood the most important military and political leaders on Earth. General Paul Martinez commanded the Terran Space Force. Secretary of State Marcus Webb handled diplomacy. Dr. Samuel Harper led the Weapons Research Division. Together, they formed the Terran Defense Council. "They offered us nothing," Catherine said, her voice flat and hard. "Restricted travel lanes that would keep us boxed into a tiny corner of space. Technology embargoes that would prevent us from advancing. Population controls that would limit how many children we can have. Mandatory disarmament that would leave us defenseless." "And in exchange?" General Martinez asked, though he already knew the answer. "Protection we do not need and trade rights we can develop on our own." Catherine pulled up a holographic display showing the Council's offer in detail. "They want us weak, controlled, and dependent on them. They dressed it up in pretty words, but that is what this offer really means." Secretary Webb shifted uncomfortably. He was a diplomat by nature, trained to find compromise and avoid conflict. This situation went against every instinct he had. "Admiral, with all respect, we have only been traveling between stars for 80 years. The Council has been doing this for thousands of years. Perhaps we should consider their perspective. Perhaps their terms seem harsh, but are actually reasonable, given our inexperience." Catherine turned to face him directly. "Their perspective is fear, Secretary. They are afraid of us. That is why they invited us to join." Not out of kindness or welcome, but because they watched us take apart that crashed Zerani scout ship and rebuild its technology in 6 months. She changed the display to show a timeline. Their own engineers said it would take us centuries to understand Zerani jump drive technology. We did it in half a year. Within 10 years, we built our first ship that could travel between stars. Within 20 years, we had colonized 14 worlds. We went from a single planet to a small empire in less time than some council species take to agree on a lunch menu. The room fell silent. Everyone remembered those early years. The excitement of discovering they were not alone in the universe. The fear of what that might mean. The determination to ensure humanity would never be at the mercy of alien powers. They want to put a leash on us before we grow too strong, Catherine continued. If we accept their terms, we will never be free. We will always be a minor species, begging for scraps at their table. Our children and grandchildren will live under their rules forever. And if we refuse? Asked Dr. Harper quietly. He was a gentle man who preferred laboratories to war rooms, but he understood the stakes better than most. Then we stand on our own. We continue to grow, to innovate, to expand. We become strong enough that they cannot threaten us. We write our own future instead of accepting the one they want to give us. General Martinez nodded slowly. He had spent his entire career preparing for the possibility of conflict with alien powers. The Council will not accept our refusal quietly. They will try to force us to comply. Yes, they will, Catherine agreed. They will send ships. They will make threats. They will try to intimidate us into submission. That is what they have done to every other species that showed resistance. She turned back to the main display, showing the Sol system with all its defenses. Years of secret work had turned humanity's home into a fortress. Weapons platforms hid in the asteroid belt. Defense installations covered the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Mars had been transformed into a military stronghold. But we are not every other species, Catherine said. We have been preparing for this day since that scout ship crashed in Australia. We knew eventually we would have to choose between submission and freedom. We have chosen freedom, Secretary Webb sighed heavily. So what happens now? Now we wait, Catherine replied. We have sent our refusal. The Council will debate and argue and eventually decide how to respond. When they do, we will be ready. Across the stars in the great crystalline chamber, High Chancellor Moroth called for order. The debates had raged for hours, but a decision had been reached. We will send a fleet to the human system, Moroth announced. Not to attack, but to demonstrate our power. When they see what they face, they will reconsider their foolish decision. They will accept our terms, and this unfortunate episode will be forgotten. Ambassador Kelvith was not so certain. Something in the humans' message troubled him. They had not sounded afraid. They had not begged for better terms. They had simply said no, as if they had every right to do so. As if they believed they could back up that refusal with force. But he kept these thoughts to himself. The Council had made its decision. The fleet would be assembled, and the humans would learn their place in the galaxy. Or, as everyone believed. 3 weeks passed after humanity sent their refusal to the Galactic Council. During those weeks, life on Earth continued mostly as normal. People went to work, children went to school, and families gathered for meals. Most humans had no idea that their leaders had just defied the most powerful organization in the galaxy. Only those at the highest levels of government and military knew what was coming. Then the fleet arrived. 200 warships appeared at the edge of the Sol system, jumping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They were vessels from a dozen different species, all united under the Council's banner. At the center of the formation floated the consortium flagship, a massive ship 3 kilometers long. Its hull bristled with weapons that had destroyed entire civilizations. Its engines could move it faster than anything humanity had ever built. Or so the Council believed. Admiral Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the Terran battleship Defiant. He was younger than most admirals, only 41 years old. His promotion had not come through political connections or family influence. It had come because he was brilliant, creative, completely unafraid of doing things differently around him. His crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment for years. Every drill, every simulation, every sleepless night had led to this. Now it was real. "Sir, the Council fleet is hailing us," reported Communications Officer Linda Hayes. She was calm, professional, showing no sign of the fear she must have felt. "Put them through," Nathan ordered. The main view screen flickered, and the face of Supreme Commander Vexaroth appeared. He was a Kathrani, a species that looked like giant mantises standing 8 feet tall. His carapace shimmered with colors that shifted as he moved. His compound eyes reflected the light of 100 displays around him. "Human vessel," Vexaroth said, his voice translated by the computer into flat, emotionless words. "You are ordered to stand down immediately. You will escort our diplomatic ship to your homeworld. Your leaders will reconsider their position on Council membership. If they refuse, there will be severe consequences." Nathan leaned back in his chair. He had studied Kathrani body language for months. The way Vexaroth's antennae twitched told Nathan that the alien commander was confident but also curious. The Kathrani had never faced humans in battle. They did not know what to expect. "Supreme Commander," Nathan replied calmly, "I am afraid I cannot do that. You have entered sovereign human space without permission. According to our laws, that makes you trespassers. I am going to have to ask you to leave." Vexaroth's mandibles clicked together rapidly. Among his species, this was the equivalent of laughter. "You have 47 ships, human. I have 200. Your species has been traveling between stars for less than a century. My people have been conquering the galaxy since before your ancestors learned to walk upright. Do you truly believe you can threaten me?" "I am not threatening you," Nathan said. "I am simply stating a fact. This is our space. You are not welcome here. Please leave, and if we do not—" Nathan shrugged, a gesture he knew the Kathrani would understand. "Then we will have a problem. But I notice you brought a diplomatic ship with your fleet. That tells me you are not entirely certain this will be a fight you can win. If you were certain, you would have just attacked." The transmission ended abruptly. Vexaroth had cut the connection without another word. Nathan allowed himself a small smile. He had gotten under the alien commander's skin. "Good, Commander Kim," he said, turning to his tactical officer. "Status report on the defense network." Grace Kim checked her console. She was the best tactical mind in the fleet, able to track hundreds of variables at once and find patterns that others missed. "All satellites are in position and powered up. The jamming field generators are ready to activate on your command. Asteroid batteries are charged. Mars defense grid is online." "We are ready, Admiral," Nathan nodded. "Then we wait. They came here to scare us into giving up. When they realize that will not work, they will either leave or attack. Either way, we do not fire first. We let them make the choice." For 6 days, the two fleets faced each other across millions of kilometers of empty space. Neither side moved. Neither side attacked, but both sides watched. On the Council flagship, the intelligence officers worked constantly, trying to learn everything they could about human defenses. What they found disturbed them deeply. Commander Azorani Analyst reported to Vexaroth, "The human defense network is far more extensive than our intelligence suggested. Our initial estimates were completely wrong." Vexaroth turned all his attention to the analyst. "Explain." "They have weapons platforms hidden throughout their asteroid belt. Hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. We are detecting military installations on the moons of their outer planets. And Mars appears to be a fortress world. The power signatures we are reading suggest weapon systems we have never encountered before." "That is impossible," Vexaroth said. "They have only been spacefaring for 80 years. No species could build such defenses in so short a time." "And yet the readings are clear, Commander. There is more. Their ships are emitting energy signatures our computers cannot identify. We do not know what weapons they carry. We do not know what they can do." Vexaroth stood in silence for a long moment, processing this information. He had expected to arrive with overwhelming force and watch the humans surrender immediately. Instead, He found himself facing an unknown enemy with unknown capabilities. Back in the Great Council Chamber, the delegates watched live feeds from the fleet. The initial confidence had faded. Now there was worry, uncertainty, and the first hints of fear. "We should negotiate," urged Ambassador Kelvith. His four eyes moved nervously, unable to settle on any single point. "Whatever the humans want, we should give it to them. A species that can advance this quickly is not one we want as an enemy. If we back down now, we show weakness," High Chancellor Morath argued. His glowing skin pulsed rapidly with agitation. "Every minor race in the galaxy will think they can defy us. The Council has maintained order for 12,000 years because no one dares to challenge us. We cannot afford to let that reputation crumble." "What good is reputation if we lose our fleet?" asked the Valesi delegate. "Look at those readings." The humans were not surprised by our arrival. They were waiting for us. They wanted us to see their defenses. This is not a bluff. They are ready to fight. On Earth, Admiral Catherine Brooks monitored the situation from the command center. Secretary Webb stood beside her, his face pale with worry. 6 days, Webb said. "They have been sitting there for 6 days. What are they waiting for?" "They are trying to figure out what we have," Catherine replied. "Their intelligence told them we were weak. Now they are seeing the truth, and they do not know what to do. What will they do when they decide?" Catherine turned to look at him directly. "They will attack, or they will leave. Vexarath cannot sit out there forever. His leaders want results. He has to do something. And if he attacks, can we win?" Catherine smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Secretary, we did not spend 80 years preparing just to lose. Those ships out there are powerful by galactic standards. But galactic standards are about to change." Webb shook his head slowly. "I hope you are right, Admiral. Because if you are wrong, we will not get a second chance." "I know," Catherine said quietly. "Believe me, I know." On the bridge of the Defiant, Admiral Nathan Cole received a priority message from Earth. New orders from Admiral Brooks. He read them twice, then looked up at his crew. "Everyone," he said, "the waiting is almost over. The Council has given Vexarath an ultimatum. Force our compliance or face disgrace. He has no choice now. He has to attack." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They had known this moment would come. Now it was here. "When they come," Nathan continued, "we show them what humanity can do. We show them that we are not afraid, and we show them that challenging us was the worst mistake they ever made." Commander Grace Kim spoke for all of them. "We are ready, Admiral." Nathan nodded. "Good, because here they come." On the view screen, 200 Council warships began to move forward, weapons charging, ready for battle. The first war between humanity and the galaxy was about to begin. The order came from the Council at midday Earth time. Supreme Commander Vexarath received it on his private channel, encrypted and urgent. The message was simple. Force the humans to comply or return in disgrace. There was no third option. There was no room for negotiation. Vexarath read the message 3 times. He had served the Consortium military for 60 years. He had conquered rebellious worlds and crushed pirate fleets. He had never lost a battle. But as he looked at the sensor readings from the human system, he felt something he had not felt in decades. Doubt still, he had his orders. The Council had spoken. The fleet would attack. "All ships," Vexarath announced over the fleet-wide channel, "advance to attack formation. Target their command vessel first. Destroy it, and the rest will fall." 200 warships surged forward as one. Their engines burned bright against the darkness of space. Energy weapons charged with power that could melt mountains. Plasma torpedoes loaded into launch tubes, each one capable of cracking a planet's crust. On the bridge of the Defiant, Admiral Nathan Cole watched them come. His face showed no fear, no worry, nothing but calm determination. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with smooth efficiency. "They are committing fully," reported Commander Grace Kim from the tactical station. "All 200 ships are advancing in standard consortium attack formation." "Standard?" Nathan repeated with a slight smile. "That is their first mistake. They assume we will fight by their rules. He turned to his communications officer. Linda, signal all Terran ships. Initiate Veil Protocol on my mark. Linda Hayes nodded and sent the encrypted message to the fleet. 47 human ships received the order and prepared to execute. The Council fleet continued its advance. Energy beams lanced across space, brilliant lines of destruction aimed at the Defiant. Plasma torpedoes streaked forward in waves of blue fire. By all their calculations, the first volley alone should have destroyed half the human fleet. It did not. Veil Protocol. Now, Nathan ordered. Across the Sol system, thousands of hidden satellites activated simultaneously. They had been placed years ago, disguised as space debris, asteroids, and old defunct equipment. Now, they revealed their true purpose. Each satellite projected a sophisticated jamming field, and together they created a wave of electronic interference that swept across the entire battlefield. On the Council flagship, every targeting system went dark at once. What is happening? Vexroth demanded as alarms screamed around him. Our targeting computers are blind, an officer reported, his voice cracking with panic. We cannot lock onto anything. Our weapons are firing blind. The energy beams that should have sliced through human ships hit nothing but empty space. The plasma torpedoes that should have found their targets sailed past harmlessly. 200 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy were suddenly throwing punches in the dark. Switch to manual targeting, Vexroth ordered. Use visual confirmation. But before his fleet could adapt, the human ships moved. They did not fly like any vessels the Council had ever seen. They did not accelerate gradually or turn in wide arcs. They simply appeared in new positions, as if space itself bent around them. One moment the Defiant was in front of the consortium formation. The next moment it was behind them. Human scientists had spent decades studying the crashed Zorani scout ship. They had learned its secrets and then improved upon them. The result was a propulsion system that broke every rule of physics the Council believed in. The human ships could move in ways that should have been impossible. All batteries, fire, Nathan commanded. The asteroid belt came alive. Hidden among millions of rocks, human weapons platforms opened fire. But these were not ordinary weapons. Human engineers had developed kinetic accelerators, electromagnetic railguns that could launch tungsten rods at a fraction of the speed of light. The first volley crossed the battlefield in seconds. 3 consortium cruisers, their shields designed to stop energy weapons and plasma, found themselves hit by solid projectiles moving faster than anything they had ever encountered. The rods punched through their shields like they were not there. They tore through armor, through decks, through everything in their path. 3 ships died in the first 10 seconds of battle. Possible, Vexroth breathed as he watched the wreckage tumble through space. Their shields were at full power. Commander, the human weapons appeared to be kinetic rather than energy-based, the science officer reported, working frantically at his console. Our shields are not designed to stop physical projectiles at such velocities. Then adapt the shields. Cannot. The shield harmonics required would take hours to calculate. We do not have ours. More human weapons fired. Missiles that seemed to disappear and reappear closer to their targets. Energy beams of a type no Council species had ever seen. And always. Those devastating kinetic rounds that no shield could stop. The Defiant and its fleet danced through the battle with impossible grace. They appeared, fired, and vanished before the Council ships could respond. They attacked from angles that should not have existed. They coordinated with perfect timing, never hitting each other despite the chaos of the battlefield. Admiral Nathan. Cole had studied galactic military tactics for 20 years. He knew how the consortium fought. They relied on overwhelming numbers and superior firepower. They expected their enemies to form defensive lines and trade volleys until one side was destroyed. They had conquered hundreds of species this way, but humanity did not fight that way. Humanity had learned from centuries of warfare against itself. They knew about guerrilla tactics, about surprise and deception, about using mobility instead of brute force. And they had built their fleet to fight their way. 4 hours into the battle, Supreme Commander Vexroth faced a terrible truth. He was losing. Damage report, he demanded. though he already knew it would be bad. "We have lost 63 ships, Commander. Another 42 are heavily damaged. Enemy losses appear to be 7 vessels. 63 to 7. In 4 hours, the humans had destroyed or disabled more than half his attacking force, while losing barely anything themselves. If the battle continued, he would have nothing left." On the Council flagship, the remaining officers looked to their commander. Some wanted to continue fighting, unwilling to accept defeat. Others just wanted it to end. Vexorith saw the fear in their eyes, the disbelief. None of them had ever imagined this was possible. He thought of his orders: force compliance or return in disgrace. But there was nothing to force now. If he pressed the attack, the humans would destroy every ship he had. He would not even be alive to face disgrace. For the first time in Consortium history, a Supreme Commander gave an order that had never been spoken before. "All ships," Vexroth said, his voice heavy with shame, "retreat. Fall back to the system edge and prepare for emergency jump." The Council fleet turned and ran. Ships that had expected easy victory now fled for their lives. Behind them, the human fleet held position, watching but not pursuing. They had made their point. There was no need for more death on Earth. Admiral Catherine Brooks watched the enemy withdrawal through her command screens. Secretary Webb stood beside her, his face white with shock. "It worked," Webb whispered. "It actually worked." "Did you think it would not?" Catherine asked. "I hoped. But hoping and believing are different things." He paused, looking at the casualty reports coming in. "We lost 7 ships. Approximately 800 people," as Catherine said quietly. 800 people who died defending their home. We will honor them. We will remember them. But their sacrifice was not wasted. Webb shook his head slowly. "What happens now?" "The Council will not accept this. They will come back with a larger fleet, more ships, more weapons." Perhaps Catherine agreed. "But they have seen what we can do. They know now that we are not a weak species to be bullied into submission. Whatever they do next, they will have to think carefully about the cost." In the great council chamber, the delegates watched in stunned silence as the remains of their fleet limped back into friendly space. 200 ships had gone out to teach humanity a lesson. 137 returned. Many of them barely functional. High Chancellor Morath sat on his throne, his glowing skin dim and flickering. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Council had been defeated in open battle. The news would spread across the galaxy. Every species under their rule would hear about it. The foundations of their empire were beginning to crack. "What do we do now?" someone asked into the silence. Morath had no answer. For the first time in his long life, he had no idea what came next. The galaxy had changed. Nothing would ever be the same again. News of the defeat at Sol spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within days, every species under Council rule knew what had happened. A young race, barely a century old in space, had broken the mightiest fleet the Consortium had ever sent against a single enemy. The impossible had become real. The effects were immediate and far-reaching. 3 minor civilizations declared their independence from the Council within the first month. They had been members for thousands of years, accepting the Council's rules because they believed they had no choice. Now they knew there was another way. If the humans could stand alone, perhaps they could too. On a dozen worlds, resistance movements that had been quiet for generations suddenly found new strength. Protests erupted in places that had not seen public demonstrations in centuries. The Council's enforcers struggled to maintain order as cracks appeared in an empire that had seemed unbreakable. High Chancellor Morath summoned an emergency session of the full Council. The great crystalline chamber was packed with delegates, far more than usual. Everyone wanted to witness what would happen next. "This cannot stand," Morath declared from his throne. His skin glowed brighter than it had in weeks, pulsing with determination. "One loss does not define us. We have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. We will not let a single battle undo everything we have built." He stood and walked to the center of the chamber, where all could see him clearly. "We will assemble the Grand Fleet. Every combat vessel from every member species will gather here. Then we will return to the human system and end this rebellion once and for all." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Grand Fleet had not been called in over 2,000 years. It was a force so large that no enemy had ever survived facing it. Hundreds of thousands of ships from across the galaxy, united under Council command with respect. "Chancellor," interrupted Admiral Kelvith, who had been given command of the military response after Vexareth's disgrace. "Our analysts have completed their assessment of the battle. I believe the Council should hear their findings before making any decisions." Morith's skin flickered with annoyance, but he nodded. "Proceed." Kelvith activated a holographic display showing the Battle of Sol in detail. Ships moved across the projection, weapons fire-traced lines through space, and the devastating human attacks were highlighted in red. "The humans deployed technologies we have never seen before," Kelvith explained. "Their jamming systems rendered our targeting computers useless. Our best engineers estimate it would take us centuries to develop equivalent technology. The humans did it in decades." He pointed to the human ship movements. "Their propulsion technology allows them to execute maneuvers that our physics said were impossible. They do not just accelerate quickly. They seem to bend space itself around their vessels. Again, we have no idea how they do this." The display shifted to show the kinetic weapons hitting Council ships, and their weapons bypass our shields entirely. Our shields are designed to absorb and redirect energy. They cannot stop physical objects moving at such extreme velocities. Redesigning our shields would take years, perhaps decades. "Then we will overwhelm them with numbers," Marath insisted. 1,000 ships failed, but what about 10,000? 100,000? No amount of advanced technology can defeat infinite numbers. Perhaps Kelvith agreed carefully. "But there is something else the Chancellor should know." Paused, clearly uncomfortable with what he had to say. "Our spies within human space have sent back intelligence. The humans were not fighting at full strength in the Battle of Sol." The chamber went completely silent. "What do you mean?" Marath asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "They were holding back. They have weapons they did not deploy. Weapons they consider too destructive to use, except as an absolute last resort. Our sources could not determine their exact nature, but the humans call them extinction-level countermeasures." A Valesi delegate spoke up from his seat. "Are you saying they have weapons capable of destroying entire species?" "That is exactly what I am saying, and we have no idea what those weapons are or how they work. If we send the Grand Fleet and the humans decide to use those weapons, we might not just lose the battle. We might lose everything." On Earth, Admiral Catherine Brooks was conducting her own analysis of the situation. She sat in her office with General Martinez, Secretary Webb, and Dr. Samuel Harper. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of computer systems. "The Council is scared," Catherine said, studying intelligence reports on her screen. "Our sources say they are debating whether to assemble a larger fleet or try diplomacy. There is no consensus." "Which approach do you think they will choose?" Martinez asked.
"Oh,
"Diplomacy eventually. They are not foolish. They know now that they cannot win a direct fight without unacceptable losses, and they cannot afford to keep losing ships. Their empire is already starting to fall apart." Secretary Webb leaned forward. "If they choose diplomacy, what do we ask for? What would it take for humanity to accept membership in the Council?" Catherine shook her head. "We do not want membership. Not on any terms they would offer. We want something else entirely. We want freedom. Not just for us, but for everyone they have under their control." Webb's eyebrows rose. "You want to bring down the Council?" "I want to change it. The Council has kept the galaxy in a state of forced peace for 12,000 years. No wars between members, true. But also no freedom, no growth, no choice. Species join because they have no alternative. That is not peace. That is tyranny wearing a pleasant mask." Dr. Harper spoke up quietly. He had been sitting in the corner, listening carefully. "Admiral, there is something I need to raise. My team has been monitoring Council communications. We have detected references to something called Final Protocol." Catherine turned to face him. "What is Final Protocol?" We are not entirely certain, but based on the context, it appears to be some kind of galaxy-scale weapon. A last resort, similar to our own countermeasures. If the Council cannot defeat us militarily, they might attempt to destroy us entirely. The room went cold. Everyone present understood what that meant. The Council might choose annihilation over defeat. How long until they could deploy such a weapon? Catherine asked. But we should assume not long. If they have had this capability for thousands of years, they likely have it ready to use at any time. Catherine stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over Washington, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Somewhere out there, billions of people were living their lives, unaware of how close they had come to destruction, unaware of how close they still were. Then we need to change the calculation, she said finally. We need to make them understand that destroying us would mean destroying themselves. We need to ensure that any attack on humanity would be the last thing the Council ever does. How do we do that? Webb asked. Catherine turned back to face them. We already have assets scattered throughout Council space. Intelligence agents, hidden ships, planted devices. We accelerate those programs. We make certain that if humanity falls, the Council falls with us. Martinez nodded grimly. Mutually assured destruction. If they cannot win and they cannot destroy us without being destroyed themselves, the only option left is genuine negotiation. Exactly. And when they finally agree to talk, we will not be asking for membership. We will be demanding a new order entirely. Secretary Webb looked troubled. This is a dangerous game, Admiral. If something goes wrong, if they call our bluff, billions could die. It is not a bluff, Catherine replied quietly. That is the point. They need to know absolutely that we will follow through. That there is no scenario in which they win and we lose. Only scenarios where everyone wins or everyone loses. She sat back down at her desk and began drafting new orders. The galaxy is about to change, one way or another. Our job is to make sure it changes in the right direction. Across the stars, in the Great Council Chamber, the debate continued late into the night. Some called for total war, others urged caution and negotiation. But beneath all the arguments, one truth was becoming clear to everyone present. The old ways were dying. The Council could try to hold on to the past, or it could adapt to a new future. There would be no going back to the way things were before. Humanity had made sure of that. The only question now was what would rise from the ashes of the old order, and who would be left standing when the dust finally settled. 2 months after the Battle of Seoul, a single ship jumped into the space above the Council homeworld. It was small compared to the warships that usually visited this system, barely larger than a cargo freighter. It carried no visible weapons. Its hull was painted white, the color humanity used for peace. The ship was called Unity, and it carried something far more dangerous than weapons. It carried the truth. Ambassador Daniel Carter stood on the bridge, watching the massive planet grow larger through the viewport. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen both the best and worst of what intelligent beings could do. He had spent his life studying alien cultures, trying to understand how different species thought and felt and dreamed. Now he would use that understanding to try to save the galaxy from itself. "We are being hailed," his communications officer reported. "Accept it." The screen flickered, and High Chancellor Morath appeared. He looked older than in the recordings Daniel had studied. His glowing skin was dim, and his movements were slow. The stress of recent events had clearly taken its toll. "Human vessel," Morath said. "You have entered Sovereign Council space without permission. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded." Daniel remained calm. He had expected this. "Chancellor, I am here to negotiate. Real negotiation. Not the kind where you make demands and we obey. I have information that the Council needs to hear. Information that will determine the future of every species in this galaxy. You are in no position to make demands. Your single ship is surrounded by the defensive fleet of our homeworld. You could be destroyed in seconds." Daniel smiled sadly. "Yes, we could. But then you would never learn what we have done. And believe me, Chancellor, you need to know." He pressed a button on his console, and a data transmission went out to every receiver in the system. Every ship, every station, every communication device on the planet below received the same information at the same moment. The first part of the transmission was a complete set of technical specifications for humanity's weapons systems. Not just the ones they had used at Sol, but everything, including the weapons they had held back. The extinction-level countermeasures that Dr. Harper had mentioned. Devices that could crack planets, collapse stars, render entire regions of space uninhabitable for millions of years. The second part of the transmission was proof. Evidence that humanity had already placed fail-safe devices throughout Council space, hidden on 100 worlds, disguised as asteroids, buried beneath the surfaces of moons, silent and waiting. Morith stared at the data scrolling across his screens. His skin, which had been dim, now flickered rapidly with alarm. This is impossible. Our sensors would have detected any such devices. Your sensors detect what they are designed to detect, Daniel replied. We spent decades learning how your technology works. We know its limitations better than you do. Those devices are real, Chancellor, and they are everywhere. You are bluffing. Daniel shook his head slowly. I wish I were. Do you know why we built those weapons? Why we scattered them across your space? It was not because we wanted to. It was because you gave us no choice. From the moment we reached the stars, you treated us as a threat to be contained. You tried to put us in a cage before we could become strong enough to resist. So we prepared for the day when you would try to destroy us. He stepped closer to the screen, his expression serious. If humanity dies, the Council dies with us. Not because we want to destroy you, but because we refuse to be destroyed ourselves. This is what you have forced us to become. The Council chamber erupted into chaos as delegates received the same transmission. Some shouted in anger, demanding immediate military action. Others sat in stunned silence, understanding for the first time the true scope of what humanity had accomplished. A few quietly began calculating whether there was any way to find and disarm the human devices before they could be activated. There was not. High Chancellor Morith sat on his throne, processing everything he had learned. 12,000 years of Council rule, and it had come to this. A young species, barely a century old in space, had created a situation of perfect deadlock. The Council could destroy humanity, but only at the cost of destroying itself. What do you want? Morath asked finally, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Daniel transmitted a second data package. A proposed treaty. It was unlike any agreement the Council had ever considered. The galaxy does not need another empire, Daniel said. It needs something new. Humanity is willing to share our technology, our innovation, our drive to improve and grow. In exchange, we want freedom. Not just for us, but for everyone. The treaty called for fundamental changes to how the Council operated. No more forced membership. Species would be free to join or leave as they chose. No more technology restrictions. Knowledge would be shared openly, allowing all species to advance together. No more population controls or travel limitations. Every being in the galaxy would have the right to determine their own future. This would destroy the Council, Morith objected. No, Daniel replied. It would transform the Council, from a tool of control into a true partnership of equals. You have maintained peace for 12,000 years, and that is no small achievement. But peace without freedom is not really peace. It is just quiet oppression. The negotiations took weeks. There were arguments, threats, and moments when it seemed everything would fall apart. But slowly, painfully, agreement was reached. The hardliners in the Council were overruled by those who understood that the alternative was mutual annihilation. The treaty was modified, debated, and finally accepted. The old Council did not die, but it changed into something entirely different. The era of forced compliance ended. Species that had lived under Council rule for thousands of years suddenly found themselves with choices they had never imagined. Some chose to remain members, valuing the benefits of cooperation. Others chose independence, eager to chart their own course. All were free to decide for themselves. Admiral Catherine Brooks retired from active military service. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for war. And now that war had been avoided, she found she needed a new purpose. The newly formed Galactic Assembly appointed her as humanity's first permanent representative, a role that let her continue shaping the future she had fought so hard to create at the inaugural session of the Assembly. Catherine gave a speech that was broadcast to every world in known space. Billions of beings from hundreds of species watched as she stepped up to the central podium. For too long, this galaxy has been governed by fear, she began. Fear of the unknown. Fear of difference. Fear of change. Humanity knows something about fear. We have spent our entire existence afraid of the dark, afraid of each other, afraid of what lay beyond the next horizon. She paused, looking out at the vast assembly of alien delegates. But we learned something. Fear does not protect you. It imprisons you. The only way forward is together, facing the unknown side by side. Her voice grew stronger. We did not come to the stars to conquer. We came because we are curious, because we want to learn, to grow, to discover what is possible. We hope you will join us. The Assembly, for the first time in 12,000 years, gave a standing ovation. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. 3 years later, the first joint human-alien research vessel was ready to launch. It was called the Horizon, named for the promise of new discoveries waiting beyond the known. Scientists from 40 different species had worked together to build it, combining their knowledge and skills in ways that had never been attempted before. Dr. Samuel Harper, now director of the Galactic Science Initiative, attended the launch ceremony. He had traded his weapons research for something better, something that built instead of destroyed. Standing beside him was a young Zerani scientist named Velkith, one of many aliens who had applied to join the mission.
Nervous?
Harper asked as they watched the final preparations. Velkith's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Harper had learned meant amusement. Terrified, but also excited. Is this what it feels like to be human? Harper laughed softly. Pretty much, yes. We are always terrified. We just do not let it stop us. The ceremony began with speeches from various dignitaries. Ambassador Daniel Carter spoke about the importance of exploration and discovery. Admiral Catherine Brooks talked about the courage it took to reach for the unknown. Leaders from a dozen species offered their blessings and hopes. Finally, the crew boarded the Horizon. They represented the best minds from across the galaxy, united by a common desire to learn. The captain was human, but the bridge crew included members of 5 different species. The science teams were even more diverse. As the engines powered up, Harper felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Catherine Brooks standing beside him, watching the ship with a mixture of pride and hope. "We did it," she said quietly. "Not just surviving. Building something better? Do you think it will last?" Harper asked. Catherine considered the question carefully. "I think it has a chance. For the first time in 12,000 years, species across this galaxy have hope. Not just safety, not just survival, but actual hope for a better future. That is worth more than all the weapons we ever built." The Horizon's engines ignited, brilliant plumes of energy pushing the ship upward. It rose through the atmosphere, leaving the planet behind, heading for the edge of explored space. Daniel Carter watched it go, standing in the observation gallery with tears in his eyes. He had dedicated his life to understanding alien cultures, to finding common ground between different species. Now that work had led to something he had never dared to dream, a galaxy united not by fear, but by shared purpose. The ship reached orbit, paused briefly, and then jumped into faster-than-light travel. In an instant, it was gone, carrying the hopes of 100 species into the unknown. 3 years before, the galaxy had been divided between rulers and ruled, between the powerful and the powerless. A young species called humanity had refused to accept that division. They had stood their ground, shown their strength, and then offered something no one expected, a chance for everyone to be free. The old order was dead. The new order was just beginning, and for the first time in a very long time, the future was full of possibility. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the horizon flew on, its crew working together, learning together, dreaming together. They did not know what they would find out there, but that was the point. That was what made it worth doing. The galaxy had finally learned to look forward instead of back. And whatever came next, they would face it together.